people that follow you are not necessarily guaranteed to see your content. You have 1 million followers, a lot of that is paid often, and so it's not even an authentic number in many cases. If you're still indexing as that being your hero metric, you're falling behind because then you don't actually know what's happening.
I'm Eric Fulweiler, and this is Scratch, bringing you marketing lessons from the leading brands and brains rewriting the rulebook from scratch for the world of today.
Hey everyone, it's Viren here. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Scratch. In today's conversation, I was joined by Misbah Uraizee of Nectar Social. She is building the world's first agentic social commerce platform for disruptive brands, working with brands like Olipop, Medicaid, and a bunch of different challenger brands that you would have heard of. Now, Misbah's career and background is quite fascinating. She was a graduate of Yale, holds over 10 plus patents, and has been profiled in the likes of TechCrunch, Forbes, and all sorts of great publications. But probably most interestingly for our CMO audience, she was a product leader at Meta, working across Facebook, Instagram, Feed, and Stories, and also the messaging functions within those platforms. So yes, you guessed it, I do ask her about how these platforms have built their algorithms and also what's next if you're a CMO, what you need to be doing in terms of social, in terms of building organic, which I think everyone will find some value in, honestly. We also get into talking about AI, of course, buzzword of the moment, and flavor of the century probably at this point. But we talk about specifically how AI is impacting what appears on feeds, how it's going to change content which appears on feeds, but also how it can help you improve your workflows and really build that organic community that you're looking for on these platforms. So yeah, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Misbah of Nectar Social. Misbah, thanks for joining me today on Scratch. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Great. Very excited to have this conversation. I know since the first time we spoke on our prep call, I was kind of fascinated by what you were doing and what you're building. So why don't you give the audience a very quick overview, 30 seconds on what you are doing at Nectar Social and why it is going to change the world of social.
Yeah, happy to dive all straight in. So my background is ex-Meta. I spent the last decade on the product engineering side there. Founded this company with my sister, who's also ex-Meta on the engineering side. We're headquartered here in California, and we're going very deep when it comes to helping scale brands when it comes to social platforms. So we are the AI native category leader when it comes to community management, social listening, influencer, all in one across these platforms, and really thinking of ourselves as a social operating system. So going deep and understanding what are the products that a brand might be selling, what is their brand voice, how do they converse with consumers today inside these platforms, but then also all the workflows that they're doing and be able to access data at scale. We transcribe millions of videos. We're super analyzed on what's happening in those videos. We can see things at scale, and that really supercharges all of our customers to be able to do more and ultimately drive more revenue from these channels.
Sounds good. And I'm going to switch really quickly to what is normally our icebreaker question. So I don't know if you've listened to any previous episodes of Scratch, and if you have, then you'll be well ready and well versed for this one. But what is one challenger brand you're passionate about right now and you cannot nominate your own brand?
I cannot nominate my own brand. One challenger brand that I'm super passionate about, I think, is Medicube. I don't know if you've seen their virality on platforms like TikTok, but they have been crushing. They've really nailed how they show up inside of these social platforms, the amount of creators that they're working with, but then also how they're maintaining their consumer connection. So the product is obviously killer, but that can only take you so far. I think that what they've gamified is really that virality loop of incentivizing their community to talk about them, incentivizing influencers to talk about them. They're everywhere, and they're doing a really amazing job. So I know they're definitely in the challenger category for a lot of brands right now.
I'm going to have to check them out. I've never even heard of them.
Yeah.
What's their actual product or service, or what do they do?
It's a Korean skincare brand.
Okay.
So I think in general, Korean skincare has been having a moment for the last few years. And I think they've really honed in on what resonates with consumers in this space. They have a device that they use for your skincare. So if you're doing your nightly routine, I would recommend checking them out. But they have a pretty solid way of showing up inside of the video formats inside of these platforms. So it ends up being a great demo for their products, ends up getting a lot of engagement in the comment sections. They're very responsive. So I think they've really nailed it in terms of the moments and how they go to market inside of Meta, TikTok, all the platforms. Reddit, they have a huge community of fans and followers in Reddit as well. So it's interesting to see their growth.
Not to oversimplify or overgeneralize this tactic, but is it kind of like the monsterification of the skincare, or have they just kind of taken a few core elements from what
I think that is a very interesting angle in terms of how you put it. I think there are a lot of similarities in terms of how Gentle Monster has been part of the moment, and obviously they're also coming and the leading kind of brand on the sunglass category in Asia. To some degree, yes. I think there is just a desire to be able to access best in class for anything that you're shopping for. And Korea, I think, is leading the category, especially when it comes to beauty and skincare for a lot of their products. A lot of innovation is coming out of there that then makes it to the US. And so the brands that have really capitalized on cross-pollinating the Korean market, but then also the US market, are the ones that are scaling really, really quickly. And Medicube is definitely at the forefront of that.
I'm definitely gonna have to check them out. I'm sure my wife knows all about them. She's very heavy into the Korean skincare, and it's been trying to get me to build a nighttime routine on Korean skincare, which hasn't yet made it past soap and water. So we'll see. It's really interesting to me, actually. We will definitely speak about this, and definitely in the context of social. But I think one of the things that I'm starting to notice more is this like shift of a cultural axis in terms of what is defined as cool. Like before, it was predominantly like everyone in the world was a 51st state of the US and like the culture that the US exported. And that is completely shifting eastward now. Like whether it's Chinese EV vehicles coming to Europe, like BYD and things like that, or it's like Korean skincare brands and like Korean dramas as well. Just like, 100%. It's really interesting to see this shift.
I think we're no longer the source of culture and being export that. I mean, that still remains to be one of the biggest exports for America, but we're also consuming. There's a desire. I mean, there's high diversity in America in and of itself. And so I think because it's so easy to access, and I think social platforms have a lot to do with this, to be honest, and so easy to understand what's happening in other countries and what's working well for other people, it's been eye-opening. I think the last 5 years have been insane in terms of growth and access to products that we wouldn't have otherwise discovered or even known about, but can. TikTok Shop, I think, has been interesting because there's been so many new vendors that have been able to, drive one-click purchases and adoption. And you probably wouldn't have seen those products on Amazon, or if you did, you probably wouldn't have triggered a purchase on them. And so I think there's just more and more that's happening in this category, and at the forefront of it is the innovation that a lot of these social platforms are leading. So yeah, 100%.
I think it's really interesting because one of the things, like just moving us into like the first sort of, I guess, chapter of our conversation is this idea that, over the past decade or so, social platforms started off as this very organic, very like, grassroots thing, which you could connect with and build your communities on. And like, oftentimes it was a really good source of revenue for brands. I think over the past 5 years, you've seen this kind of like shift to pure paid, like it's become pay to play essentially for most CPG brands. But you have an interesting dynamic and an interesting thinking position on this in terms of there is still organic growth to be had on these algorithmic platforms. So talk to us a little bit about that. Like you've spent a lot of time, actually shaping some of these feed algorithms at Meta and other places. So what do you think most marketers are still misunderstanding about how organic works and what that distribution looks like today?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually think the old model is pay to play simply because it was so easy to do that with low CACs pre-iOS 14. And that's what we saw in Meta as well, right? Like there is a whole class of brands, many of which do not exist anymore, that grew off of just paid ads and pay to play, short and, very easy margins, and no investment whatsoever on the actual consumer relations, on community, on organic. And I don't think organic and paid need to be pivoted one against the other. I think that's also a thing that happens in a lot of marketers' minds where they're thinking about, oh, I'm mostly going to invest in pay to play because that's what I know. That's what feels safe to me. That's where I can see the return. If I put this amount of capital in, I'm going to get some amount of, ROI out of this. It's the easier path in my opinion. I think the brands that have really nailed it, that don't necessarily even start with pay to play, are the ones that know what they're selling and who they're selling to. So it's actually an underlying question of, do you know who your audience is, or are you just shooting darts at the wall trying to figure out who's going to purchase and doing a broad kind of pay to play situation? And so I think that's a big component of it. In 2026, I see a lot of our customers, a lot of the brands that we work with, these are challenger brands like the Medicubes of the world. These are enterprise brands also, like the L'Oreals, et cetera, of the world. And so what you see on both sides is a desire to have this kind of what I call a viral loop with their actual community. So are you hosting events for them? How do those events then show up inside these social platforms? Are you responsive to the people that are inquiring about your products? There's so much pre-purchase inbound that's happening inside of organic, in your DMs and your comments. Are you paying attention to the conversations that influencers are having with their sub and micro communities and what their fans are saying about the products that they're recommending? If you're plugged in to all the crevices that matter, if you're showing up in all of those surfaces, the nooks and crannies essentially of where consumers are spending their time, Reddit has had a reawakening in the last few years because it is also sourcing, it's seen as the authentic voice essentially, even from OpenAI perspective and the models and LLMs and how consumers are searching there for product recommendations. Reddit remains to be one of the top cited sources when a product is getting recommended. And that's for a reason. Like ultimately you're trying to get to the authentic voice. And so I think playing it back, that's where a lot of marketers get it wrong in terms of just focusing on one or the other. I think both are really synergistic. If you're doing pay to play, it's driving traffic into organic. If you don't have a presence on organic, if you're not engaging with consumers on organic, you're going to see a lot lower conversions on pay to play as well. So it is very synergistic. You need to invest in both. You ideally need to actually solve the harder problems up front of knowing who you're selling into, who are the audiences. You're not selling a product for everyone. Who are those niches that you're building on top of? And I think that's where a lot of brands are spinning, where they don't actually know. They might be catering to 40 plus, they might be catering to like 12 to 17, and they're very confused. And so the brands that really hone in on who is our target consumer, they can accelerate regardless of whether it's on organic or whether it's on pay to play.
It's a really tough scenario. Like just speaking to CMOs every single day, pretty much, like you see that, there's kind of two buckets of it, like blue chip brands who they've built like not a critical mass of followers and people who engage with them on social for them to like test and learn and do different things. But then you also see the other category of CMOs who are just kind of starting out. They don't have any followers. It's a completely new nascent product or a service, and they're trying to build that reach and like build through organic means only, because a lot of times at that stage, like that's what budget allows, right?
Yeah, 100%.
That seems to be like a never-ending loop for a lot of them. Like, what do you think is the number one thing that they can do to like really get out of that first cycle of, hey, you're just going from 0 to 1? Like, what does it take to build something at that point?
We work with a lot of CPG brands, and the ones that are the most viral, like Olipop, Poppy, et cetera, of the world, where we see kind of their organic DNA of what did year one look like. And a lot of what I hear from those founders is year one was showing up in the places that matter. It was showing up in person, selling our drinks, trying to figure out in person, like, do they taste well? What is the feedback? Looking at the reactions on people's faces. Because I think you can't often do that just digitally speaking. If you do have a product that is a physical product that you can sell, that's easy. If you have a software product, similar ways, but you can get that feedback up front. So just thinking about what does year one look like, I think it is as much as you can building that direct connection and testing out a lot of micro audiences. That's one model I've seen work. That's a lot of what I hear founders talk about. Another model that I've seen work really well is actually using pay to play to figure out who your end audience is and who you're selling into and what that feedback channel is. Because the comment sections on Facebook are extremely telling. I don't know if you've seen that. I don't know if if you're on Facebook or you've scrolled through your feed, if you've seen those ads. People are very trigger happy. They're very easy to share their opinions in the comment section of what they think about your ad. And so I've actually seen creatively a lot of founders use that in the first 6 months to not to drive sales, but to essentially run a large experiment to understand what products, what angles, what collateral, what copy is going to resonate with which audiences, and then kind of do rapid iteration and really understand what is the product that you're ultimately selling. Both problems, both approaches solve the same problem.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not hugely on Facebook anymore, I have to admit. I like to think of myself as maybe too young for that still. But no, definitely massively on YouTube. And I kind of see the same thing in the creators who kind of blow up on YouTube. You see them really watching their comments feeds and literally engaging with the audiences there, but actually just creating the content that their audience asks them to create. Like it's that simple. And in terms of the media side of things, obviously we run a podcast here, but we run a bunch of other media formats that we put out. And one of the things that we've been thinking about is, and I haven't even told Lance this, who's a producer on the call today, but like just replicating what Diary of a CEO has been doing. Like they've been kind of doing this test and learn approach on all of their like hyper clickbait thumbnails. They'll put like 15 different thumbnails out, the ones with the most emotional, obviously crazy hooks, and test them on Facebook with like £5-10 each and see which one hits before they put out the final one.
Exactly.
And that's a really interesting, like it's A/B testing just in a different format. So
I think data is so important, and people are sitting on so much data, but not enough time to actually synthesize that and action on that. And so that's why one of the reasons I'm super excited about AI and kind of what's happening in this category.
And speaking about that actionable piece that you just said, there's the sort of key word there. Like, how can CMOs really look at turning away from this just being like an organic brand awareness piece of their marketing mix to somewhat of like a measurable revenue channel?
I think it's the same as pay to play, to be honest. For the longest time, you weren't able to actually understand, hey, if someone engages with this specific piece of content that we just published, how much is that actually driving in sales? I think that is becoming a largely solved problem. That's something that we think about on our side for a long time. And similar to how you might be running email campaigns, you might be running SMS campaigns, you can actually now understand through content campaigns, through direct message campaigns, exactly how much revenue you're driving. It is a gold mine. And I think ultimately what platforms like TikTok, especially over the last year, have done is made it so easy for brands to flood the platform now with content, with sponsoring influencers. But then once you do that, you still need to pay attention to what are consumers then actually saying on the comment sections of those influencers that you're sponsoring. What are consumers saying when they're DMing you? And if you're not responding to those people, if you're not connecting the dots and understanding who they are ultimately and just leave them as handles, that's where you're leaving money on the table. That is becoming a solved problem where you can actually start building digital identities to understand and pixelate and really, treat it as the same in many cases as a paid channel. And so I think that's a lagging indicator. The brands that are growing the fastest are doing it really, really well.
And so essentially that sounds to me like they're really capitalizing on those private conversations that are happening inside their social channels. But if I'm a CMO today, what does that actually look like for me? What do I need to hire new community managers who are specifically trained on answering DMs? Do I need to train an agent on that?
That's a
how
great
do
question.
I make sure that I scale that engagement?
I think everyone needs to be hiring for a role called marketing engineer. And that is a new category that's being defined. Every CMO, every CEO that I talked to over the last 6 months is trying to figure out who is the persona that I'm hiring for in my organization? What is the tech stack that I'm creating? How am I disrupting with my existing legacy tech stack with an AI native tech stack? Those are probably the number two questions, like the top two questions that every single person is going through right now. It is, who is the person I'm hiring for? This is someone that is going to be AI, fluent, or at least eager to adopt AI versus being scared of AI. So that's step one, just in terms of cultural definition. Number two, I think the roles are shifting where instead of doing the things like manually step by step, having 5 different tabs open, having spreadsheets, copy pasting, handwriting, like all the things, you're instead hopefully reimagining your tech stack to be AI native and then setting that up for success, connecting it to the right context points, making sure it's connected to your commerce stack, to your brand voice, to your consumer and customer data. If you have all of those three things connected, you can actually do a lot. Agents can help you do a lot. And then that marketing engineer role is essentially making sure that platform is set up for success. It's being maintained. It is continuously being optimized versus them actually doing the exact job. So I think that's a big shift that's happening across the industry pretty rapidly right now. That's something that I think about a lot in terms of the people that we hire internally at Nectar. It's a role that we call AI strategist, which I think is really, really cool. It's the same persona that I would want someone on the other side, working at like a different company to be able to hire internally that is taking them longer to do. But for me, I know exactly what I'm looking for. So faster for me to do it so that we can start leading the space of like, here's marketing engineers that work at Nectar that can show you exactly how to ramp up to AI, reimagine your workflows.
That definitely jumped us forward a couple of questions, but actually that's a great lead off point in terms of like what is actually happening, and to kind of dial us back to the thing you mentioned about TikTok Shop. I feel like that's a relatively new invention for the most part, and like it seems like brands are spending a lot of time there and audiences are spending a lot of time there. So I'm kind of really interested to understand like how do you figure out like buying intent on those types of platforms which are new again? Is that again in the remit of the marketing engineer, or is that something that the CMO needs to do right out the gate?
So playing that question back, how do we figure out buying intent on these platforms? I think from a CMO's perspective, you need to invest in all of these platforms because they are where consumers are discovering you and where you need to show up. I think the KPIs that you care about ultimately is the number of impressions that you're generating, the engagement that you're getting, the conversations that you're driving. And ultimately, you're starting to see a sales lift. TikTok Shop specifically is going to help you build awareness about your products. It's going to get people hooked in to maybe become early adopters or try or test those products. It's going to be optimized for, purchases under $35. It's going to, build just a lot of organic content that you can then start upselling and using as part of your meta ads play. So I see a lot of those loops happening. But it's not ultimately going to be your reoccurring for many brands. I mean, for some, yes, it absolutely will be. Depends on the category and vertical and what you're selling. But for a lot of brands that have, a pretty diverse product line and not everything fits under $35, it's not necessarily going to be the always on, way to drive a ton of revenue. I think what you're going to actually start seeing is what we're starting to call in the industry halo effects. And so that is the holy grail, where I talk to a lot of our customers day in, day out, and they're saying, hey, we pulled back on TikTok as a platform and we started noticing that brick and mortar was going down. What's happening? So now we know, and it's not about, I just drove like $5 million in sales last month on TikTok Shop. It's more of, hey, we generated this many thousands of influencers, this many thousands of people that are micro influencers, not even like these mega large people that are talking about us everywhere inside these platforms, essentially building social proof. So ultimately, if you're the CMO, you need to be building social proof in every single platform that matters, whether that's Reddit, whether that's TikTok, whether that's Meta, because ultimately those are what's going to feed into sources of sales. And then it's like, okay, lower in the funnel, every platform is unique. You can start kind of connecting the dots and understanding, hey, someone discovered us on TikTok, then they went to Amazon. This is actually the person, how they converted. That is the orchestration that you can start doing. But baseline, you need to start investing in these platforms, understanding what your content strategies look like and who you should be working with. And that's a very iterative process if you're just getting started.
I'm going to ask a question in a second, but I'm going to hold that one first.
Okay.
I wanted to ask, if we're saying that whole dynamic has changed and, we've moved past this era of like vanity metrics of like likes, shares kind of meaning anything. If a CMO does want to prove that actually this organic community strategy is predictable and like it's a revenue engine, what should those sort of like new North Star metrics be that they should focus on? You mentioned it's not necessarily just like $5 million in revenue driven. So what are those metrics?
I think they should be measuring engaged community and ultimately what the value of that community is. And that's something that we measure for a lot of our customers, where we are building single digital personas and profiles of every single handle that is engaging with them actively, intentionally. we are building like timeline histories. We know a lot of data about them across platform. And that's a number ultimately that you should be moving, up and up month over month versus follower count. Like again, X Meta, we got rid of following feed for a reason, right? People that follow you are not necessarily guaranteed to see your content. That concept doesn't even really work inside of platforms like TikTok. It's kind of old. And I still see, because it's a hero metric on a lot of profiles, it's more of a metric of, hey, you're a serious business, you have 1 million followers, a lot of that is paid often, and so it's not even an authentic number in many cases. But that's it. It's a vanity metric at the end of the day. I think ultimately, if you're still indexing as that being your hero metric, you're falling behind, because then you don't actually know what's happening with the consumers that are actively engaging with you. You're not trying to incentivize people to actively engage with you. They're not sliding into your comments. They're not DMing you. They're not tagging you, mentioning you. All of those things allow you to show up and reach additional audiences. So it is the network effect that you want to capitalize on versus the follow effect, which is silent and in the background and not guaranteed to kind of grow you month over month.
Okay, that's a great answer. And I'm going to ask this question at risk of sounding like I'm just trying to get a cheesy clip out of it. But if I'm a CMO today, how do I game the algorithm today?
How do you game the algorithm today? A few different ways. I think if you can incentivize your customers through a loyalty mechanism to actually tag, mention, comment, tap share on your content on a reoccurring basis, you're gaming the algorithm. Because ultimately the algorithm cares about conversations as the primary metric that you're driving. It looks at the comments that you're responding to, the shares that you're driving, the DM conversations that are being generated, the depth of those DM conversations, how many back and forths people are having. Are they having a true conversation? And that drives more people to get notifications to then open up their Instagram, their TikTok, their Reddit platform. That drives up time spent inside of these platforms. So if you help the platforms help you. That's how you should think about it, ultimately. And if you can build that virality loop by tapping into your existing customer base and understanding that obviously 90% of them have a presence on social and they're probably, paying attention to you. And if they aren't, incentivize them to do that. Then you've unlocked one great mechanism that scales quite nicely to continuously become viral inside of these platforms.
Awesome. And one of the things that we kind of started speaking about a bit before was this idea that actually there's a lot of noise now on these platforms. Like AI is definitely taking over the platforms, whether it's like automated bots that are responding to comments and things like that, or even just like the content that we're seeing on these platforms. Mm-hmm. So we will get into the specifics, but I want to just get your quick take. What's real versus hype when it comes to AI and marketing right now?
Did you see Adam Mosseri's recent content guidelines on Instagram post? So this is very top of mind, I think, for the platforms themselves as well, where they're trying to incentivize authentic content versus AI slop. Like that's going to be an ongoing problem. I think that's one approach for them to do that and really tell creators, hey, if you're doing AI slop, it's going to get de-promoted inside our platforms. I think they probably need to go a step further, to be honest, and just detect that the quality of content is not good quality and stop promoting that content. Because ultimately, I think it's pretty clear that most content going into the next few years, like 5 years from now, I think most content is going to be AI generated. And so if you take that off the table and it's rather less of a conversation about whether it was generated using AI or through your camera, but more of a conversation around, is this actually valuable, high quality content versus low quality content? And how do you define low quality versus high quality? Then I think that becomes more interesting. Because I think trying to push back against creators using AI, I mean, creators themselves don't want to necessarily use AI, but the tides are shifting. Like it's just, for certain types of content, it just makes sense to do that. The cost savings are there. I think from a business perspective, it makes sense to do that. If you're paying millions of dollars in photo shoots and campaign shoots, you no longer need to do that necessarily. But I don't think your content needs to be, promoted less because it was generated using AI. I think it needs to be de-ranked inside of the algorithms if it's just not high quality content. And that's where I think it's a fuzzier conversation.
Yeah, that's a really tough conversation as well, I think, because I think we're living in this weird period of kind of almost like a hangover of like low CACs and like CMOs being forced to justify $1 in, $10 out kind of thing. And so for a long time, at least in the way I've seen it, CMOs have and marketers generally have kind of deprioritized what good creative taste looks like. Not everyone, but there's a huge population which have been kind of forced by their boards or CEOs to do that. And now you're kind of seeing this resurgence that everyone needs to have like really, really good taste. Like in a world where everyone is a creative director and everyone's a designer because Claude Design can help you do anything, like you have to have good taste, right? That's the only distinguishing factor.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's true for every role, to be honest. Like we were talking about earlier around AI and what does a marketing engineer need to do versus how is a CMO thinking about hiring. I think they should be optimizing for people with taste that are also AI fluid versus people that don't have strong opinions on where we should be going, who should we be collaborating with, what is the content that we should be creating, who is the ultimate audience that we're selling into, how do we differentiate ourselves against our competitors, what is the niche? Like all of those are signals to hire the right person versus someone that is outsourcing their brain to AI per se. So I think there's a lot of that happening as well. Like when we interview, not a lot of the candidates, but a non-zero percentage of the candidates have stopped thinking for themselves. And that's really alarming. And so that's something that we then are starting to probe on further, is just understanding what is your thought process. I'm going to assume that you use Claude to come up with this presentation. That's okay. But what did you put into context into Claude? How did you think about these micro decisions? Do you have taste? Like, do you understand, what a business should be doing in this scenario versus scenario B? How do you make trade-off decisions? I think all of those things are going to continue to be differentiators. Going back to your statement around CMOs have been primed for such a long time from their boards, from whatever the external sources are, pressures are, to just have that hangover from CAC. I think that's 100% on point. Like it feels risky to invest in anything else. And yet the brands that are leading the way, that are those fast growing viral challenger brands, are and understand that they need to start building a business with a different lens versus relying solely on optimizing for a single metric, which is CAC. I think that comes with time. So it is, it's fascinating to kind of see that divergence in the market right now.
Yeah. If I came to you today and I was like, hey, Misbah, I'm starting a CPG brand. Like, I want to sell on social storefront, all that type of stuff. What would be the top 3 things you would tell me to go away and do before I did anything else?
If you're just starting the brand?
Yeah.
Like I said in the beginning, I think you need to hone in on who is your exact audience, who are you selling into, and why does that product stand out to them? Because if you don't have answers to those questions starting off, you're going to be, spinning for a long period of time. Like you can probably throw ad money at it and start selling products and then start kind of capitalizing on that. I've talked to so many brands that have successfully done that all the way to like hundreds of millions of ARR, but then they're capping out and they don't know how to scale beyond that. And if they stop their ads engine, the sales stop. They don't actually have any customer loyalty. Those customers are not necessarily coming back. So if you look underneath the hood, it's directly correlated to how much money they're spending on ads, and it stops there. And so I think there is a loyalty aspect of it, of nurturing your core audience of fans, of the early adopters of your product, and really understanding what is a differentiator for your product, what is ultimately going to get more people to buy it, how do you position yourself in the market to differentiate yourself. And I think if you don't have those answers in the first few months, figure it out, then it's going to be hard to have the scaling conversation. I think if you skip to the scaling conversation, that's where you start struggling. And
one final question from me, because I actually realized we're like 45 minutes in already, which is great, sign of a good conversation, and I'm learning a lot. If you mentioned a lot about like these social native loyalty loops that you should try and engineer, like can you give me an example of a brand who has the best loyalty loop that you've seen?
Olipop has one of the best ones that I've seen. And I think they get a few things right where they're thinking very intentionally about who are they collaborating with, what are the activations that they're doing. They do a good blend of digital activations, making sure that they're part of the cultural moments that drive fan engagement. They understand their audiences and how they differ between different platforms. Like I can tell you, they have a very unique segment on TikTok, which is different than their segment on Instagram, which is more millennial focused, which is very different than their segments on Reddit that might be talking about them. which are like, the soda nerds, essentially. You're not going to find those nerds necessarily having the same conversations inside of other platforms. And so, one, they understand their customer base. Two, they've done a great job cross-pollinating and being part of the spaces and conversations that their customer base cares about relative to those platforms specifically. Three, the in-person events that they do are also optimized for virality. So understanding when they are hosting an event that it is going to show up on social and reverse engineering how it shows up on social. Four, in terms of how they work with creators, it is tasteful. Like they are trying to scale, but it's not just like a mass scale play. Five, it's like a no-brainer to their team that they need to respond to their fans on these platforms. They have tens of thousands of messages that are flowing in every single month. And they actually prioritize responses, personalized responses, acknowledging all of their tags and mentions, making sure they are, engaging with other viral content and being part of those spaces. I don't know if you remember Super Bowl a couple of years ago and how they versus Poppy, that was like a catalyst point for both brands, where Poppy was sending a lot of vending machines to influencers that were quite expensive. And so their broader fan base was like, okay, you're pandering to only a subset of the 1% of like folks that are already pretty well off, and you're sending them these expensive vending machines that are, maybe going to be not so great. And so Olipop was able to capitalize on the moment by sliding into the comment sections, engaging, building fan love. And so how do you find those moments? How do you tastefully scale and hijack the virality of other content that's trending inside these platforms? And ultimately, how are you everywhere all at once? So I think they've kind of approached it with multiple angles versus relying solely on paid, I would say. And that's worked quite well for them. I think another brand that comes to mind is also Rode with Coachella activation. They were amazing in terms of the activations that they did, in terms of how they leveraged Haley in the audiences and how people started like getting surprise and delight essentially of all the places that Haley was showing up at, of the folks that were standing in line to even get into Coachella. And it's obviously very hot, and the swag and like product that they were essentially giving out for free, and food that they were giving out for free in those lines, that was only because if you were in the line. So they had very specific activations that were reverse engineered to show up quite well on social with their face masks and like their stickers and stuff. All of that, you knew that this was like someone that had been to the Rode booth, that had, Rode products, and it felt like it was a cool thing to be associated with the brand. And so how do you think about those micro decisions ultimately really matters to drive conversation.
Yeah, Rode are such a great brand. Both Rode and Olipop were on the Rival 50 that we produced for the top challenger brands of 2025.
Nice.
Both incredible brands, like across differentiation, relevance, and talkability. Like they are always just driving those things. So yeah, really great examples. Final question before I let you go. I'm not going to ask you what social looks like in 5 years, because social is moving way too quickly. So I'm going to ask you, what does social look like in 5 months?
In 5 months. Oh my gosh. I think the path to purchase is shrinking even more in 5 months. So if you pay attention and you're reading between the lines, between all the new launches, between Meta, TikTok, Reddit, a lot of YouTube, even where they're investing, they are trying to shrink the path to sales as much as possible. So creators being able to, have links directly on their posts to drive sales, that's a new launch that Meta just recently rolled out last month. That's never, something that hasn't been possible till date. That's why you have link in bio, and very few people actually go down that funnel. Or a TikTok shop, I think there's a lot of innovation happening there and continues to be. Amazon, I know, is investing more in this space as well. YouTube as an umbrella and what they're doing for creators to make it easier for them and brands to be able to manage conversations. I think they're building a whole DM inbox, et cetera, internally as well. So a lot of the APIs, the new products that these platforms are launching, are going to only accelerate how you can do commerce inside of these platforms and drive more sales, both from the brand side, but also from the influencer side.
Awesome. All right. Great. A quick lightning round, and then you are all done. If your brand were a pizza, Misbah, what type of pizza would it be?
If Nectar was a pizza?
Yep.
Oh, that's an easy one. Kind of a gross answer probably, but we recently had a cake received into the office that was a peach cake. And so that makes more sense, but probably something to do with peaches or, nectarines, something along those lines. Probably a weird pizza taste, to be honest, but I'd have to give that answer because that's generally what our logo, is about.
Never tried a peach pizza, but it feels like something like one of the beauty brands will do. Like
garden, I don't know, herbal, peach, something, I don't know. We'll replace pineapple with one of these fruits.
I mean, yeah, I heard that Rode did like that pickle lip gloss thing, so maybe there's an angle there.
Pickles are having a moment. That's something that we have been watching pretty closely with our Nectar data, actually. So it's really interesting to see pickles globally having a big moment right now. Yeah.
Cool. What's the best campaign you've seen recently?
The best campaign that I've seen recently. This is not that recent, but last year in the fall, I saw the Liquid Death and Elf Cosmetics campaign collab, and I thought that was really interesting. A really well done campaign, huge kind of cross-pollination between two audiences that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be collaborating with one another. So I thought that was pretty innovative.
Great. And final one, what's the biggest missed opportunity in marketing right now?
Biggest missed opportunity in marketing right now. It has to go back to doubling down on AI to scale all these workflows even faster. I think that's it. Making sure the AI is such a buzzword right now, but if you can identify the platforms and like solutions that are actually driving revenue, that are driving workflow automation, that your team can get behind, I think that is worth the investment. That is worth reimagining kind of your tech stack and thinking about your entire team, because that's what the challenger brands are doing. That's how they're growing and scaling. So it's a lot right now, which is cool.
Great. Awesome. Well, Misbah, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a great conversation, and I think our audience will get a lot out of this in terms of like the future of social and how social is actually being played today. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Scratch is a production of Rival. We are a growth consultancy that builds challenger brands, strategies, and capabilities to disrupt categories. If you want to learn more about us, check out wearerival.com. If you want to connect with me, email me at eric@wearerival.com or find me on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, share with anyone you think might enjoy it, and leave us a review. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.